Hello and welcome back to the World Othello Finals, World Othello Championships 2019. On table 1 this round 11, we've got Piy-TAKAHASHI, the 2 times world champion, versus Akihiro Takahashi, who made his first impact by running up as a junior, but running up in the main becoming runner-up in the main tournament a couple of years ago. The game is about to start. Now, Piy-TAKAHASHI is a very strong opening player. He doesn't think too much during the opening. He knows what he likes. He knows the way the game goes after the openings he plays. And you'll find that he generally plays pretty quickly. He did stop to think there, so I get the impression that Takahashi is thought about playing Piy-TAKAHASHI specifically. But Piy-TAKAHASHI has decided that he's kind of happy with what he's prepared, and he's just continuing. And after the brief thought, Takahashi has just decided which line he was going to play, and so they're both still very much in book. Okay, so we've had 22 moves already. Both players have now used exactly 1 minute, and Piy-TAKAHASHI is the first one to sit back and look seriously at the board. Again, it isn't obvious. It doesn't necessarily mean that he's out of book. But it means that he's choosing between options. So why don't we take the opportunity to actually have a look at where the board is after the first flurry of moves when it's difficult to follow. It was a mainline tiger for most part. There's lots of variations of the tiger. The tiger move was c3, but there's lots of ways that both black and white can play after the tiger. It's a very, very popular opening, but there's variations, and people prefer different variations. People who play tiger often know more than one variation well, and therefore are able to keep an element of surprise by varying the versions that they play when they're using it. White has got largely central discs. Okay, so as I've said in other games, it's the decision to take edges or not can affect the direction of the game. I don't feel as though black can not take this edge, because allowing white to take it would mean that black has to start playing through all of the white pieces, and his 2 outliers at c3 and c7 don't make that easy. He does have the option of playing d8 because he would also get d7, but he's chosen to take the edge. Just get the names the right way round on the screen so that you can see that Piy-TAKAHASHI is on the right and is playing black. So white has got this big wall, black has got the opposite edge. Black would like to play h7, and white would like to actually play g7 and sacrifice against the h edge, but circumstances have to be right to be able to do that. And so the next part of the game will be black trying not to disturb the white wall, trying to disturb it as little as possible. White Okay, so the c1 move that's just been played is an example of just trying not to disturb the wall. And white taking the outlier down at c8. So Takahashi is looking very, very confident here. It's quite possible that he prepared this opening specifically and he knows the variations of how it works out. Okay, Piy-TAKAHASHI plays b4, sorry. So electing to play through now, getting access to h7, which is the move that he would like to play. Takahashi plays, excuse me, b5. Black might consider c5 here, so that when he takes h7, he will have a balanced edge with all black discs on G, the G column. This can sometimes make it difficult for white to sacrifice either in the top right corner or the bottom right corner, because there's a fear of swindle. And c5 is also lots of solid discs on the inside of the board, inside of the pieces that have already been played. It does flip d6 and e7 as well. So before playing it, he might wish to play something like d8 first. Okay, he's going straight. He played b4 to get on that diagonal, and so he's taken his tempo on the edge immediately. So it's a tight game at the moment. White is pulling black to the left. Black's got an edge, but it's not a particularly bad edge, and it's not going to offer. Doesn't seem that it's going to offer any easy sacrifices. So white will continue to do his best to play quietly, wanting black to play through his left-hand side. So something like a4 now looks like a reasonable option. He doesn't actually have too many choices of quiet moves. So b3 isn't a quiet move. Anything at the top doesn't have access to e1, which he'd quite like to play. So yeah, he plays the a4. Now, black is the one who's having to think carefully about how to keep up this trying to play quietly. b3 looks like a reasonable option. It does open up c5 for white, but once that's been played, d1, the b3 disc gives access to d1, and then it would be white's move, probably a3. Black could also play out the bottom edge, d8. And he's got to think, he's going to be doing that at some point, and he needs to think about, not just do it mindlessly, but ask himself the question why he's doing it, and therefore play it at the right time. He's chosen to do it immediately. White will there's a few options for white here. b3 and g8 are the obvious two. d1 is also possible, and g3 is not so good, but also possible. It depends on again how he wants the game to go from here. So if he chooses to take the edge, it'll go one way. If he plays b3, he's continuing to pull black towards the edge. Black can't take the bottom edge too easily himself. Anyway, it flips and allows white into d7, leaving it to be black's move to play through the wall again. So d7 is probably the most natural move here. It's very internal. If white takes the edge, then he flips 3 diagonal pieces and blocks himself off from... No, he doesn't block himself off, he can still get to the c. The c5 square. Okay, that's an interesting choice. Making the whole of the 3-row black does allow white to play the quiet move to g3. It does give black an extra move over there to f1. But the reason black has done this move is because it does get the b3 disc and allows d1 to be played as well. So e3 is possible here, G3 is possible here, and the edge, taking the bottom edge, is also possible. I think that I like the E1, but Takahashi has chosen to take the edge. So he's obviously thinking about how he wants the game to go now, and he's thinking that he will have the advantage if black is playing into the bottom left corner. So black will play D7 because he won't want to let white take that move as well. Then white will play C5 probably, and then black can take his extra move of D1. And then it will be white who's having to play through. So the player here that needs to play through the other person's wall is the player who will be at a disadvantage. White has more options in how to do it, so it wouldn't be as serious a problem as if black needed to play through into the bottom left. Black does also have the option of taking the left-hand edge because it doesn't flip. So if he plays A5, it doesn't flip B5. So it doesn't really give white any more moves. Then white would probably take D7. And black could play D1. Forcing white to play into the top left. But as I said previously, it's not that white has, even if white has to play through, it's not as if he has bad moves. He's forced into bad moves. And it's quite likely that he'll be able to play out the top edge and then force white to play through anyway. And Piy-TAKAHASHI has chosen to do just that. Yeah. So that's the obvious move. And I think Piy-TAKAHASHI will now play D1 and then ask the question of Takahashi. You know, how do you want to do this? And Takahashi will look at his various options of playing through in the top. It is possible for black to also play C5. Which is interesting because although it looks like he's kind of flipping a lot of discs and making the edge less attractive. It looks like he's giving white moves into the bottom left corner, but white doesn't have any access for discs into the bottom left corner after c5. So white would still need to play through at the top. But the question is, if white does then play through at the top, what can he do it in such a way that, although he doesn't have immediate access down those diagonals to a6 and b6, can he play the top edge or out into the top in such a way that he does get access down there? And he has so many options at the top that I'm pretty confident that he would be able to do that. But it is an interesting move nevertheless. So Takahashi is looking very, very relaxed. He's only used 5 minutes, 10 seconds so far. No, sorry. No, yeah, 5 minutes, 10 seconds. Still got 24 minutes, 52 seconds on his clock. So the game is going obviously in the way that he had anticipated from his opening variation. And Piy-TAKAHAShi is thinking, because he hasn't got many options, and in fact I'm not entirely sure why he is thinking this long. That there's really only d1 and c5 that he can play, possibly a6 as well. And each of them kind of says the game needs to go in a certain direction. So c5, as discussed, forces white to play through the top. Eventually gives white some play down the left-hand side. Looks like white would be able to play that out. If black plays d1, then again, it just looks like white's got nice ways to play out and possibly even get access to the c5 square himself quite quietly, or have black play it so that white can't. This is the business end of the tournament. This is the point at which the players really need to beat their opponents. They are now playing with the semi-finals in mind. They know what they need to do in the last few rounds to make it into the semi-finals. For what it's worth, I think that Piy-TAKAHAShi will play d1. Maybe not. In fact, I think he'll play c5. I think it's in fitting with the way in which he tries to control the board by having central pieces. And a mass of pieces without causing access difficulties. And the trouble with d1 is that after e2, which is white's natural response, possibly g3 instead, but black doesn't have any access to e1. Okay. Ooh, okay. So Piy-TAKAHASHI has chosen to play a6. So it's similar in theme to c5, but it does allow white to play c5 himself. And Takahashi is really not thinking too long in this game. He has indeed played c5. His intention, black is struggling here. He's now played the d1 move, and I think that e2 will follow this. And black won't have any access to e1, so it would have to play f1, leaving the e1 hole, or f2, flipping two pieces. He might be happy also to play b6 at some point. Possibly even b7. So yeah, e2 has been played. So black really is trying to work out how to make an end game of this. He's chosen b7, and the reason that he's chosen that is because it leaves 4 squares in that area. So if Takahashi plays b6, then Piy-TAKAHASHI can play a7, and the sacrifice still works. If Takahashi doesn't play b6, then Piy-TAKAHASHI can still play it himself. So even though it's an odd region, and Takahashi does play it, and I expect there to be a7 following up. By white. No, sorry, by black. And then I would expect g3, and black will have to try and find something in the top right. There is the possibility of the diagonal coming into play, the c3 to f6 diagonal, top left to bottom right. But Piy-TAKAHASHI would need to get to b8. And if he does get to b8, then it's Takahashi who might be able to just well, it's not clear how he can get to b8 anyway. the only way would be to just play it, and give white the bottom corner, and then take b2 as a diagonal. But white would always be able to cut the diagonal again. So if black plays b8 and white takes a8, then white would have the b8 disc again himself and would be able to go to g3, cut the diagonal whenever he likes. And in such a way that it looks like it would be terminal, having for black, white would have the bottom corner, lots of discs, and have access to the top corner, or play out the top corner as he wants. Okay, so instead Anjali has chosen to play on the top edge immediately. So why would he do that? Because he's going to have to play up there anyway. It's very difficult for black here. He has no options in the top right, he has no options in the top left, has no options in the bottom right. So if white can find a way of playing that doesn't upset too much, f2 is quite a fun move now, because it flips d4 and it flips f6. So it takes control of the diagonal, and black wouldn't have access to f1, and his access to g3 flips all the way along to the 3 row, and it also flips f2. So it's quite likely that he would then want to play a7 or b7. So after f2, the moves in so that the top left to bottom right diagonal would be taken. The moves for black in the top right are not good, and he wouldn't have access at that point to either a7 or b8. So he would have to play moves in the top right. So that's if white plays f2. Another option for white is to play out the bottom left. It would need to be a7. No, wouldn't necessarily need to be a7, but a good example is a7. So if he just plays a7, a8, b8, allowing black to take the corner, save both the bottom and the right edges, and then take g7 himself as the last move in the area, and then black only has one move, b2, and white should be able to find a win from there. He gives black quite a lot of stable discs, but should just be able to play it out. I like f2. I think f2 is a cool move here. I hope he plays it just because it's cool, if nothing else. But I think it's winning as well. Takahashi taking his time. Because he's got a number of options here, it's worth taking his time and making sure that there's no pitfalls, things that he hadn't thought about before. He's probably got in mind the move that he wants to play, and he's checking it, making sure that it works. Because black doesn't have many moves, it's possible to track this to the end of the game. So in the last game, a couple of rounds ago, Takahashi played Takanashi, and I was commenting on that game, and I thought that Takanashi was winning in the middle of the game, and then used a lot of time to think, and then ended up with time pressure at the end. And I asked Takahashi whether he agreed with my assessment, or whether I was missing something, and he said yes. But there were some things that I hadn't realised that made it complicated, and Takahashi had thought that he was behind and he was playing for time, so he was trying to make Takanashi think, and he was trying to make Takanashi have lots of moves and have to think when he didn't have much time. And so that was actually his strategy at the time. Now, on the board, Takahashi has played b8. This is something I hadn't considered because it opens up the swindle for black. So a7 followed by a8. But I am assuming, because Takahashi has played it, even without looking any further, just by the fact that he's played it, that's not something he would have missed. So I'm assuming, and it looks quite probable, that after a7, Takahashi can go to g2, taking control of the diagonal, denying access by black into the bottom left corner. And it looks like black is unable to cut that back. So there are probably many ways that black could have won there. This, to me, looks like a risky one, but I'm sure that Takahashi has looked it through and is perfectly happy that he can protect that diagonal. There isn't an obvious way that it can be cut, but I would be worried if I played it. I wouldn't have played it, I'd have played something else, but it's possibly the best move. Sometimes you have to make the decision between playing what is potentially the best move for the safest move. If you counter win and you know you're winning and you know that you can play it, then it's worth playing it, even if you think that there could be a bigger move. But as I say, it's in this case Takahashi has looked it through, and after a7, g2, it looks very much like white can protect that diagonal. And so black has instead decided to go to b2, and Takahashi is now playing very quickly. He's taken the diagonal anyway. So it still looks like the swindle, but black isn't going to be able to get on the diagonal. If he plays, assuming that black plays a7, then f3, f2 is met with g3, f1, which flips if black plays f1, then white plays h1 and gets into the h8 corner first. Well, let's just see how it pans out. But it's there's 5 spaces in the top corner. But I mean, g3. Yeah, this game's completely over. I'd probably try f1, but it's not going to work. Okay, Piy-TAKAHASHI tries g1, but again, Takahashi just takes the corner back. f1 now flips g2, and g2 is played and can get into the corner. Takahashi takes the right edge. Black fills in the hole at the top. Takahashi now just counting out what will be the biggest win for him. So again, this game was a problem for black. They played the opening very quickly. Takahashi seemed to play a variant that Piy-TAKAHASHI wasn't particularly happy with. Any move there would have won. But Takahashi is very good at counting and would have counted the best, known that it was the best line. And Takahashi wins 42-22. Takes another step towards the semi-finals. It would be a surprise now if Takahashi didn't make the finals, and it'll be very difficult for Pianat Ancheli to make the finals. But we'll see how the last couple of rounds go, and we'll see you back here shortly.